Compulsory food buying. Food is another human need that has become the target for exploitation by governments and private entities. I believe most people are put in a position, from birth, to depend on the government and corporations to provide for virtually 100% of their caloric needs. We are trained and beaten into believing that we have no choice but to buy their foods, and that their foods are the only ones safe and healthy enough to consume. We are often denied the ability and resources to produce food, even a small percentage of the food we need. And, as usual, when we are totally dependent, abuse ensues. We pay artificially high prices for food, and accept food from the sources that are most readily available to us, and the ones we believe to be affordable. This is because, I believe, food is controlled by only a handful of profit-driven, corrupt, and exploiting entities that do not have our best interest in mind. Despite these abuses, we have a choice to say enough and demand affordable and safe foods, and produce our own foods. And we have a choice to leave their expensive and chemical-laden foods to rot on their fancy air-conditioned shelves. We must eat to survive, and the government and corporate world know this quite well. They have exploited this basic need to pry wealth and labor out of the common people for millennia. And there is a reason why many working people mention food on the table when talking about their need to remain employed, and you are taught as a child, in school and home, that you must work to eat. Many teachings and customs follow the biblical passage, "By the sweat of your brow will you eat your bread, until you return to the ground, because out of it were you taken." And the Quranic statement, "Nobody has ever eaten a better meal than that which one has been earned by working with one's own hands." These, and many other teachings and beliefs, have tied work and food unquestionably. So, not working and eating have become taboo in our society, and something looked down upon to strict extremes. Must I remind this audience that many of us just cannot work or produce sufficient income for a myriad variety of reasons? However, although there's a certain limited truth to the former statements, greedy corporations and power-hungry governments have exploited these widely held beliefs that only those who work may eat. So, doing to gather ever more wealth and control from and over the vast majority of the people. I believe food is a human right, and therefore should be freely available to all that can pay or work for it. I also believe work is important and should be encouraged, but using starvation as an incentive for work is cruel, abusive, and exploits the poor and low income. Remember, most destitute and impoverished people are born into that condition through no fault of theirs. Yet, they are somehow expected to fall into a position of subservience and labor that often expose them to abusive treatment. To remind you that when one depends on the government and corporations for food, one of the most basic needs, one opens up for exploitation. Exploitation is the control and extraction of wealth and resources from an individual without regard for such individual's well-being. I believe public and private entities disarm a vast number of the population of knowledge and resources on food production. This disarming also happens by slowly herding large numbers of people into cities and giving the power to mass-produce food to a tiny minority of people and companies. I believe the mechanisms for this have been deregulated capitalism, despotism, and conflicts. And, since most people are uneducated, nor encouraged to grow or supply their own food, food production has been centralized to a degree that if food distribution is disrupted, even slightly, there would surely be widespread food shortages and price gouging. If there is a collapse in this centralized food production, chaos and despair would surely ensue in those population centers. And these disruptions have happened in many occasions throughout history. Most recently, as of this writing, acute food crises have occurred in Palestine, Yemen, Ethiopia, Haiti, and Afghanistan. All partly caused by over-centralization of food production. Less acute, but severe food price crises have occurred recently in the US and many other areas of the world. Most areas inhabited by people can support food production, yet most people are powerless to produce their food. They lack knowledge, and in many cases, lack access to grow their own food. This enables this powerlessness. Outrageously, many communities have outlawed people from having farm animals or growing their food in their own land. According to Clark, Simpson, and Miller.com, 2024, and a report by CivilEats.com in 2020. Industries like the orange juice and fruit in places like Florida have amassed and hoarded their markets by questionable and unethical practices, such as holding campaigns to suppress backyard orange tree growing. I recall experiencing this. There, officials drove around many areas of South Florida, demanding that people cut down their backyard citrus trees because of a certain citrus tree virus that was supposedly spreading through those areas. These officials offered meager amounts of cash for tree owners to allow them to uproot their citrus trees. Rumors had it that if tree owners refused, they often threatened the largely immigrant and low-income communities with illegal or even police action. These campaigns went on for years, later to be found as abuses mostly by Florida's better-off communities, outside of the Miami-Dade County's largely immigrant communities. That is according to an Associated Press report in 2024. Many communities in the U.S. do not allow most farm animals to be kept within their limits. Cities, homeowners associations, HOAs, housing developments, and apartment buildings are examples of places where many restrictions or outright bans exist on food production or farming. This is especially and strictly enforced on rented properties. These entities often cite the filth, noise, and the nuisance of farming activities and/or farm animals, effectively neutering any possibility for those residents to produce even a small amount of their diets. City dwellers are an overwhelming part of the U.S. and world population, about 80% in the U.S., according to Census.gov. And cities are the most restrictive places for individual food production and farming. So, most people are either highly restricted, discouraged, and even banned from producing their own food. If you live in the suburbs of a sunny state, like I currently do, you may notice that almost no one utilizes their yards for growing food. People have been so emancipated and become so accustomed to rely on the supermarket that growing food is hardly ever even considered. The US and other industrial nations have done well with the logic that hunger does not make for happy voters. So, the federal and state governments provide food help to the poorest among them. Again, mostly as a way to prevent widespread discontent and action against the government. I believe this because if you have to earn income below the poverty line to qualify for food assistance in many states, this requirement drives many needy folks to lie on their applications. And this spreads a culture of cheating and may overwhelm the system in many cases. However, the bar is often way too low for many needy families to qualify for this aid. As I write this, food is among the most expensive of the human needs to satisfy. Not only here in the US, but worldwide. We are under a runaway inflation period, especially noticeable in food prices. Many blame recent occurrences like the pandemic of 2019 or the war in Ukraine in 2022. But, although these may have been large contributors, I believe the prime drivers for the high food prices are the greed of corporations. As I write this, average food prices in the US are up around 9% on average. That is according to the USDA and the Government Accountability Office, 2023. With some areas of the country having food costs launched to almost 15% higher than in recent months. In my experience, many basic food items have risen almost 100%, or double of what they used to cost. Milk, eggs, bread, and meat prices are, in many instances, over 100% higher prices in recent months. From those outside of the lavish comfort of wealth, to those in destitute poverty, cannot afford food without hurting financially. Needless to say that wages surely have not kept up with inflation, eking up only an anemic 4.6% on average in the years after the worst of the pandemic in the US. According to a report in USA Today, 2023. So, when we are rendered crippled in producing our own food, the available food prices are often kept artificially high, and the food industry is dominated by a handful of players. So, naturally we submit to the food system that we are subjected to. And we submit to the demands that we believe are required to keep food on the table, work. Often work that disrespects and belittles our humanity. This submission then naturally leads to subservience, loss of self-control, and to feelings of powerlessness and domination. We do what we must and not what we want or see as more convenient, and we largely settle for mediocrity and work long hours for jobs we don't like. Food prices have been high before this recent inflation period, and are only now reaching ridiculous levels. Yet, we chug along and pay up what we must, because most of us are helpless and without much choice. Food giant corporations know this and just keep raising the prices and tightening their grip. Again, the filthy rich can easily afford these expensive foods, and the downright poor often use government help to pay for it. Alternatively, the poor just buy cheap junk food that they can afford. Meanwhile, the very large American working poor to middle economic classes suffer in pain. These have to work extra hard, extra long, and spend large percentages of their incomes to afford often only less quality or less quantity of foods. Food prices are often fixed for the benefit of the rich. How? Well, in fact, only about 10 major for-profit food corporations are behind most foods on supermarket shelves, according to a report from Wide Open Country in 2022. And this is a major reason why prices go up as if in concert. These greed-stricken food giants are in close cahoots with each other, and they are pamperingly protected by the US government, acting as a bunch of grotesque, pig-headed ogres, feasting from their corralled and helpless populations. They well know how the economy of food works. They know the poor and middle is the only economic class portion somewhat sensitive to food prices. More importantly, they know that food is a basic necessity that we all have. Furthermore, they operate under a government umbrella without fear of real competition from the food production world abroad. So, naturally, these companies, having little to worry about, engage in abuses and price gouging. There is a reason why most foods in supermarket shelves are manufactured domestically. That is because tariffs, laws, and regulations exist to protect the US food market. When have you seen Chinese chicken eggs, Ukrainian potatoes, or Argentinian milk on your supermarket shelf? Although some products are imported from friendly nations, such as oranges from Brazil, oils from Italy, and coffee from Colombia, many of these products go through US-based companies or are stooge companies controlled by the US market. The US protects its food market ferociously, for reasons of purported food safety or national security. I happen to have worked for a company involved in the poultry and orange juice industries many years ago, and I can tell you that these industries are in their golden age, making record profits year by year. These protected industries participants often enjoy lucrative jobs with benefits and perks most other Americans only dream of in today's economy. Fat paychecks, late-year company vehicles, prime commercial spaces, generous retirement accounts, housing buyback options, yearly bonuses, etc. Again, I was part of this for a few years. And this obscene amount of profits don't come from magical government coffers. It comes from the general population entirely. This protectionism of the food industry allows for the manipulation of prices by the big corporations and a sort of race to the top, chasing ever higher profits, all on the backs of middle-class America. Again, the math is simple. The rich exploit the poor and middle classes, and the poor get subsidized by the rich and middle classes through government welfare. Living off the grid, methods and technologies allow you to produce your own food and not be abused by high food prices. The self-sustainability mentality will allow you to see the predicament you are placed in, deliberately. And this knowledge will allow you to begin to free yourself from it. You may finally see that you do have a choice outside of the 10 or so major food corporations controlling the US market. You may see how you can produce your own meat, vegetables, grains, and more, all from the backyard, pots, tubs, or even your upper-level apartment building balcony or roof. You may be able to reduce, or even cancel the amount of money you hand off to the big food corporations, who have exploited you and your community for so long. Living off the grid may allow you to have more food security and health by empowering you with locating, securing, owning, utilizing, and maintaining control over food sources. Remember, the earth provides means for food production to all of us free of charge. So, it is up to us to push aside those that want to hoard it all and reclaim this right that we all have, to access that land to feed ourselves and our loved ones.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please look for the next episode soon, and please ensure to share this with your friends and family. And please like this content and subscribe as a sign of support and for me to continue to provide this type of content to more people like you. Lastly, if you wish to support this content further, please visit the links provided in this publication. Thank you.